A year ago, he died here. I remember the day it happened. It was exactly a year ago when the entire college was shaken by the news. Ryan Carter was dead. A sophomore, an ordinary guy, someone you'd barely notice in a crowd. But his death? It was impossible to ignore. They said he fell from the stairs of the old abandoned science building, broke his neck on impact, but no one could explain why he was there in the first place. That building had been locked for years. No classes, no students, no reason for him to be inside. Some said it was an accident. Others whispered that he wasn't alone that night. The fall, that didn't make sense. Officially, the report said it was just a tragic misstep. A wet floor, a bad step, and a deadly fall. But there were too many unanswered questions. Why was his phone missing? Why were his fingernails broken? Like he had clawed at something before falling. Why did the security guard swear he heard running footsteps moments before the fall? But no second set of steps? I remember watching the faculty rush to cover things up. They cleaned the stairwell, erased the footage, and locked the building permanently. As if it would make us forget. But we didn't forget. And neither did Ryan. A locker that should have stayed closed. Ryan's locker, Locker 314, was supposed to be sealed shut after his death. The school emptied it out, took his belongings, and locked it with a fresh padlock. It should have been left that way forever. But then last week, someone noticed it was open again. Not broken, not forced. Just slightly ajar, as if someone had gently pushed it open. Every morning since then, it's been found open again. No matter how many times it gets locked, it never stays shut. At first, everyone brushed it off. Probably a prank, they said, but no one admitted to touching it. Not a single student, not even the janitor. And that's when we knew something was wrong. The first sign that something's wrong. It started with small things. The janitor refused to clean near the locker. When asked why, he just shook his head and mumbled something about not disturbing the dead. One night, a student swore he heard a locker creaking open. But when he turned, the hallway was empty. Books appeared inside. Old dusty notebooks that didn't belong to anyone. Someone claimed to hear footsteps echoing from the hall when no one was there. Then came the wet footprints. One morning, a girl from my class walked past locker 314 and stopped dead in her tracks. She pointed at the floor, and we all saw it. A trail of wet, muddy footprints. They led away from the locker, but there were no footprints leading to it. His belongings were removed, but something still remains. They took Ryan's things after he died. His books, his clothes, his photos. His parents claimed his phone was never found. The school said it was probably stolen before the police arrived. But if they removed everything, why did a single page from his old textbook show up inside the locker last night? Why did the timestamp on that page read yesterday's date? And why did it have faint, smeared fingerprints? Like someone had been holding it? Ryan was gone, but his locker wasn't empty, and neither was the hallway. Some say he never left. The story spread like wildfire across campus. At first, Ryan Carter was just another name added to the college's list of tragedies. A student lost too soon. A freak accident, nothing more. But then the rumors started. Ryan never left. His locker still opens by itself. If you listen carefully at night, you can still hear his footsteps. Some dismissed it as urban legend nonsense. Others swore they had felt something strange near the old science building. One thing was certain, People stopped walking alone after dark. Whispers in the empty halls. It always happened around 3 a.m. Students staying late in the library heard footsteps echoing from the empty halls. Some even claimed to hear whispers, not words, just faint, breathy murmurs drifting from nowhere. One night, a security guard on patrol heard a locker creak open. When he turned the corner, locker 314 was slightly ajar. The cameras never caught anything. But everyone knew something was wrong. The janitor's warning. The janitor, Mr. Lawson, had worked at the college for over 20 years. He had seen students come and go. He never believed in ghosts. Until Ryan Carter. One night, a freshman joked about sleeping in the hallway to see if Ryan's spirit would appear. Mr. Lawson overheard him, and his expression turned dark. Stay away from that locker after dark. Some things aren't meant to be disturbed. The student laughed it off. The next morning, he didn't show up for class. His roommate found him curled up in bed, shaking. He refused to say what had happened, only that he had seen something. And he never walked past locker 314 again. The wet footprints that lead nowhere. At first, they appeared only after rainy nights. A few damp spots on the tiles, leading away from the locker. But then it started happening even when the weather was dry. The footprints always appeared at 7 a.m. They were barefoot, deep, heavy, like someone had just stepped out of a puddle. They led down the hallway, but they never led to the locker. One morning, a group of students tried to follow them. They traced the prints all the way to the end of the corridor. But there was no final step. The last footprint just stopped, as if whoever made them had disappeared. We thought it was just a story, until we saw it ourselves. Everyone talked about Ryan Carter. Everyone whispered about his locker. But we were the idiots who actually went to check. It was a stupid dare, a challenge to prove the stories were fake. Just a quick look, then we'd leave. But when we stood there, staring at locker 314, something felt off. And then, the lock clicked open by itself. We should have run. But we didn't. We reached forward. We pulled the door open. And that's when we realized Ryan's story wasn't over. It was just beginning. The locker that opens by itself. We stood there, staring at locker 314. Nobody wanted to be the first to touch it. It was already open, just an inch. The old padlock that was supposed to keep it shut lay on the floor, broken in half. The hallway was empty except for us. No security guards, no janitor, no one else. Maybe someone pried it open? One of us suggested. But there were no scratch marks, no signs of force. It looked like it had simply unlocked itself. I swallowed hard. Something didn't feel right, but instead of walking away, we stepped closer. A page that wasn't there before. Inside the locker, it was mostly empty. No books, no bag, no sign that it had ever belonged to anyone, except for a single crumpled page lying in the center of the metal shelf. Someone reached for it, hesitating before picking it up. It was ripped from a textbook, old, yellowed with time, but the ink was smudged, like it had been exposed to moisture or dirty hands. The handwriting at the top of the page made my stomach drop. Ryan Carter. It was his. But how? The timestamp that shouldn't exist. Someone held the page under the dim hallway light, squinting at the text. That's when we noticed it. At the bottom corner of the page, someone had written a date. Yesterday's date. But Ryan had died a year ago. A deep, unsettling silence fell over us. No one spoke. No one moved. because there were only two possibilities. Either someone planted it there to mess with us, or Ryan left it himself. A silent warning. We ignore. Something inside me screamed to walk away, to put the page back, close the locker, and leave. But we didn't. We did what every horror movie tells you not to do. We ignored the warning. We held onto the page. We took pictures of the locker. We whispered theories, convinced ourselves it was just a prank. But deep down, none of us believed it, because the hallway suddenly felt colder, like we had just let something out. If the locker opened, what else did it leave open? I don't know who said it, but the moment the words left their mouth, everything felt worse. If the locker opened, what else did it leave open? And for the first time since we started this, we weren't excited anymore. We were terrified. We need proof. We couldn't just leave it at that. If this was some kind of prank, we needed to know who was behind it. If it was something else, we needed proof. So we did the only thing that made sense. We went to check the security footage. The security guard, Mr. Evans, was skeptical at first. Kids always mess with lockers. It's probably nothing. But when we told him it was Ryan Carter's locker, his expression changed. Without another word, he pulled up the footage from last night. The footage shows nothing. At first it was normal. The hallway was empty. Hours passed. No movement. No signs of anyone near the lockers. We sped up the footage. Still nothing. From midnight to 3:14 a.m., the school was completely silent. There was no one there, except something did happen. The moment the locker opens. At exactly 3:14 a.m., the locker door creaked open. On its own, not fast, not forced, slow, deliberate, like something, was gently pushing it. My stomach tightened. We were watching it happen. And yet, in the footage, there was no one there. The camera glitches, and a face appears. Then, the screen glitched. The smooth footage froze for half a second, distorted by static. And in that half second, something appeared. A face. It wasn't clear, it wasn't normal. It was distorted, stretched, like it didn't belong to a person at all. A flash of wide, hollow eyes. A mouth that was too open. A face that looked like it was screaming in silence. Then, gone. The screen returned to normal. The locker stood open. The hallway was empty again. No one was there. But something was watching. The security guard's hand hovered over the screen. He didn't speak. None of us did. Finally, one of us whispered, "Play it again." He did, frame by frame. But this time, the face wasn't there anymore. The glitch was gone. It was as if something knew we were watching, and it was playing with us. A hoodie that shouldn't exist. The locker wasn't empty anymore. Sitting neatly folded on the metal shelf was a hoodie. Familiar. Worn. The exact same one Ryan Carter used to wear. But it didn't make sense. All of his belongings were removed after his death. His parents took everything. And yet, here it was. One of us reached for it, hesitating. The moment their fingers touched the fabric, they pulled back. It was damp. The hoodie smelled of wet soil, like it had just been pulled out of the ground. A voice note that wasn't sent. That's when one of our phones buzzed. A new notification, a voice message. But the number? It wasn't saved. It wasn't even a full number. Just a series of distorted digits. No one spoke. No one moved. Hands shaking, they pressed play. It wasn't an accident. At first, just static. Then breathing, shaky, uneven. And then a voice. A weak, terrified whisper. "He found me. Don't let him find you." The sound cut out. The file deleted itself. And we just sat there, phones clutched in our hands, too afraid to even breathe. A message from the dead? Someone checked the sender's contact info. The name on the screen made our blood run cold. Ryan Carter. But that was impossible. Ryan's phone was never found. His number was disconnected a year ago. We should stop, but we don't. A normal person would have walked away. A normal person would have closed the locker, left the school, and never looked back. But we weren't normal. We should have stopped, but we didn't. Instead, we made the worst decision possible. We dug deeper. And that's when we realized Ryan Carter didn't just die. He was taken, and whatever took him was still here. A hidden door behind the staircase. We shouldn't have gone looking, but after the locker, the hoodie, and the message, we had to know more. That's when we found it. A door. It was tucked away behind the old staircase in the east wing. Not a single person in our group had ever noticed it before. It wasn't on any school blueprints. The paint around it was old, chipped, like it had been sealed shut for decades. Someone reached out to touch it. The handle turned easily. The door wasn't locked. And that's when we made our second mistake. We went inside. A hallway that feels wrong. We stepped through the door, and everything changed. The air was thick, stale. The hallway stretched too far, much longer than it should have. The deeper we went, the colder it got. We could still hear the faint hum of the school above us, but it felt distant, like we had stepped somewhere else. Each step echoed, like the hallway was waiting for us to go deeper. And we did. Scratches on the walls, from the inside. The flashlight beam flickered over deep scratches. They lined the walls, long, jagged claw marks, some small, some deep enough to carve into the concrete. One of us ran their fingers over the scratches. These aren't old. The realization settled over us like ice. These weren't marks from decades ago. Something had been in here. Recently. Something had tried to get out. The smell of damp soil and rot. The further we walked, the worse the air became. A thick choking stench filled the space. It smelled like damp earth, wet wood, and something else. Something rotting. Someone gagged. The walls felt damp, almost like they were breathing. One of us muttered, "We need to go back." But then, footsteps that aren't ours. We stopped, every single one of us. But the footsteps kept going. Soft were slow, right behind us. Someone turned the flashlight toward the darkness. There was nothing there, but the sound of shuffling footsteps still echoed, getting closer. And then, from just beyond the beam of light, something breathed. We shouldn't be here. The silence was the worst part. We stood frozen in that hidden hallway, the air thick and cold, waiting, listening. None of us spoke, but we all felt it. Something was in here with us. It wasn't just the scratches on the walls, the damp, rotting smell, or the footsteps that weren't ours. It was the feeling of being watched, of something standing just out of sight. And then slowly, the sound of metal creaking. We turned toward the hallway, and our stomachs dropped. The locker doors start opening, one by one. At first, just one. A single locker at the far end creaked open, then another and another. Within seconds, the entire row of lockers in the hallway was opening one by one, as if invisible hands were pulling them. The metal doors groaned as they swung open, empty, waiting. But waiting for what? Or worse, who? A shadow at the end of the hall. Something stepped forward. It was wearing Ryan's hoodie. The same hoodie We found in locker 314 the same hoodie that smelled like wet soil. But there was something wrong. We couldn't see its face. Just a black, empty void where Ryan's features should have been. And yet, we knew it was looking at us. It took a step forward. And then the lights went out. The lights go out. And someone whispers our names. Total darkness. Someone let out a choked breath. Then, the first whisper, a soft, almost teasing murmur, right by my ear. Ethan? My blood ran cold. Then another whisper somewhere else. Mia? It was saying our names, one by one, in a voice that didn't belong to any of us. It was playing with us. Run. No one spoke. No one needed to. We ran. The hallway stretched longer. The open lockers slammed shut as we passed, metal doors clanging. Something was behind us, fast. The air felt thick, pressing against our chests. A shadow rushed along the walls, keeping up with us, waiting for us to slow down. We reached the staircase. I was the first to turn the corner. And that's when I saw it. The door was gone. We had no way out. His phone was never found. Until now, we were trapped. The door was gone. The hallway was too long. The lockers had slammed shut behind us. We were running out of options. And that's when we saw it. Inside locker 314, sitting in the empty darkness, untouched for a year, was Ryan's phone. It shouldn't have been there. The police never found it. His parents never got it back. So why was it here now? Someone hesitated before reaching for it. The moment their fingers touched the screen, it turned on. The last recording he ever made. The phone was already open. One single file was left on it. A voice recording. The timestamp? The night Ryan died. No one wanted to press play, but we had to. The second the audio began, everything in the hallway went silent. A low static hum filled the speakers. Then a voice. Ryan's voice, shaking, panicked. He's here. I can't run anymore. Then footsteps. Ryan didn't fall. He was taken. The audio wasn't clear, but we could hear everything. Ryan's breath, shaky, uneven. Something moved behind him. A loud scraping noise. Then a low whisper. We couldn't make out the words, but we all felt them. Ryan was begging. Please, no, please. A heavy thud, a struggle, and then silence. If you see him, don't run. The recording should have ended, but one final whisper cut through the static. Ryan's voice, faint, weak. If you see him, don't run. The phone shut off. The battery died instantly. The last thing Ryan ever said was a warning, and we had already ignored it. Something's right behind us. The silence after the recording felt wrong, like the entire school was holding its breath. Then, a shadow fell over us. Something blocked the dim light at the end of the hallway. We weren't alone anymore. And as the first locker creaked open again, we finally understood. Ryan never left, and neither would we. Our phones start buzzing. Same texts, same words. The air was thick, heavy. No one dared to breathe. No one moved. Then our phones went off. All of them. At the exact same time. Buzz, buzz, buzz. The screens lit up together, casting eerie glows over our pale faces. One by one, we checked. Every message said the same thing. Run. Too late. Locker 314. Run. Too late. Locker 314. The messages kept repeating, over and over, as if someone or something wanted to make sure we saw them. Locker 314. Locker 314. Locker 314. The same locker that started all of this. The same locker that opened every night at 3:14 a.m. Someone let out a shaky breath. And then, another notification. One final message. Ryan's number sends the last text. We checked the sender's name, Ryan Carter. Our blood ran ice cold. But Ryan was dead. His number was disconnected a year ago. And yet, there it was. A message from him. "You're next." The door opens. But it's not an exit. We couldn't stay here. We ran, racing toward the end of the hallway, our feet slamming against the floor, lockers rattling as we passed. The door appeared. Finally, a way out. Someone grabbed the handle, yanking it open. But the hallway outside wasn't the same anymore. It was longer, darker, like the school had changed while we were inside, like it wasn't going to let us leave. And then, something reaches out from the darkness. A hand, thin, pale, emerging from the shadows right beside us. Someone screamed. Ryan's hoodie flickered in the dim light. Not on the ground, not in the locker, on someone. And before we could stop it, before we could run, Ryan Carter disappeared into the darkness. And this time, he wasn't alone. The morning feels too quiet. The sun was rising. The nightmare should have been over. We stumbled out of the hallway, out of the building, barely able to process what had happened. We survived. But as we stepped outside, something felt wrong. The air was too still. The usual morning chatter of students was gone. The school felt empty, silent, like it was holding its breath, waiting. The security guard's final words. The old security guard stood by the entrance, arms crossed, watching us. Like he knew, like he had seen this before. He didn't ask why we were shaking, didn't ask why we looked like we had just crawled out of a grave. He just let out a slow, tired sigh. Then in a voice too casual, too resigned, he muttered, "Another year. Another one gone." He knew. He always knew. And he had never tried to stop it. Locker 314 opens again. We told ourselves we wouldn't look back. We promised we wouldn't. But as we walked past the main hall, a metallic creak echoed behind us. Every single one of us stopped. We turned. And there it was. Locker 314. Wide open. A new hoodie inside, one of theirs. At first it looked empty, but then we saw it. A hoodie, not Ryan's, one of ours. The one he was wearing when he disappeared. And just like before, it was damp, like it had just been pulled out of the ground. The cycle isn't over. It hit us all at once. This wasn't the end. It never had been. Ryan Carter's locker had been opened for a reason. Not because he was trying to get out, because he needed to bring someone else in. Another student would disappear soon. And just like last time, no one would stop it. Because the school wouldn't let them. Because this place isn't haunted. It's hungry. And now, it's waiting for the next name. Waiting